What's up, everybody? Week 8 for fantasy is in the books. It's a fun week. It was a full week. There weren't any buys. So we have a lengthy video today. But if you don't have time for that, or you just don't give a shit and you're just looking for ads and drops, I've got that in the post below. Happy Halloween out there. It's going to be cold today. We might get some snow this evening, so dress warm. And I'm going to have a warm drink with me that will have rum in it. All right, first game of the week. Buffalo Bills, Tampa Bay Bucks. Bills beat the Bucks 24-18. Josh Allen was all that and then some this week for QB1 for fantasy. 324 yards, 2 touchdown passes, 7 rushes for 41 yards and a touchdown. And if you're a Bills wide receiver shareholder, you had a fantastic week. Even tight end. Listen to these targets. Gabe Davis, 12. Stephon Diggs, 12, Dalton Kincaid, 7, and then breakout or potential breakout candidate, Khalil Shakir, 6. That's your slot receiver. So they looked pretty damn good. As far as a real football game goes, I'm concerned about the Bills being a top tier team. But as far as fantasy goes, pass catchers and quarterback, they're in good shape. They did just sign Leonard Fournette this week to play running back, and eventually he'll cut into James Cook's share, but they're not getting a lot of dominant production from that position, so I get it. Bucks, ugly week if you're a fantasy owner, other than Rachaad White and maybe Chris Godwin. He got you 16 points in PPR. That's pretty solid for him, but Rachaad White had 7 catches for 70 yards on 7 targets. And then after that, the distribution is pretty even. Godwin, 7 targets. Mike Evans, 6 targets. Cade Otton, 6 targets. Trey Palmer, 6 targets. Pretty solid. As far as a rushing attack goes, it does not really exist for the Bucks, and it probably won't. For the second year in a row, their offensive line is poor. I'll have to look at PFF and see, Pro Football Focus, and look at the grades on their line. I'm going to guess it's bottom of the league. All right, next game, Minnesota Vikings and Green Bay Packers. The Vikings pulled a 4-4. They won 24-10. The Green Bay Packers are 2-5. But the Vikings lost in that they lose Kirk Cousins for the year with an Achilles injury. You got to hope, the rumor is, you got to hope that they acquire a quarterback. Rumor is Jameis Winston is going to end up there. If it's Jaren Hall, KJ Osborne, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, you can knock their production down pretty significantly. My gut would be about at least 20%. But if they get Jameis Winston, he's going to air the ball out, and those targets should remain the same. KJ Osborne had 10, TJ Hawkinson 9, Jordan Addison 8, and there was a drop-off after that. Running back position, Alexander Madison had the volume on carries, but it's not as effective as Cam Akers, who wasn't that much more effective anyway. So that's kind of a mess right now on that backfield. Packers, Jordan Love doesn't look like an NFL quarterback to me. I don't see it right now. I don't know if we'll ever see it. But if you're in Dynasty, you got to know that the Packers' skill positions, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, even Romeo Doubs, who's not as athletic but can be productive, and Luke Musgrave are trades, especially if you're not in the running for a playoff spot this year. Those are targets for me. Christian Watson did have 8 targets, but he only had 3 catches. It's going to come for him, but I think it's going to take some time. And what you're hoping for from a dynasty perspective is that they're so terrible this year that they can trade up and get a quarterback, or they're so terrible they can draft like Drake May because they're a top 3 team drafting this year. Or they trade for like a Kyler Murray. So something like that. I'm anticipating that being the case, or I'm at least placing a bet that that's going to be the case. Next game, Rams-Cowboys. Man, the Cowboys just destroyed the Rams 43-20. 5-2 for the year for the Cowboys, 3-5 for the Rams. Tony Pollard not really giving you what you're looking for from a fantasy perspective. When their offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, left and went to the Chargers, I downgraded him. But there's a rumor they may trade for Derrick Henry too, so keep that in mind. CeeDee Lamb, though, that was your dude today. Heavy distribution of targets to him. 14 targets, 12 catches, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's alpha shit right there. That's his top end for the year, and he may hit that a few more times or close to it. But his floor games suck. That's the difference between him and Jamar Chase, in my opinion. The floor games. He can give you these spike weeks, but his floor weeks are shit. So keep that in mind. Rams. Whew. Not a lot for Puka and Cooper Kupp on production. Here are the targets that were interesting to me. Tyler Higbee, 7. Puka Nacua, 7. Cooper Kupp, 10. Our local hero, Ben Skronik, had 1 touchdown. Shout out to his mom, who I work with at Northeastern Group, for raising an awesome human. So that was cool to see. At running back, pretty even on distribution. Royce Freeman, 9 carries. Darrell Henderson, 12. Royce Freeman was the more productive guy, and he was the more interesting prospect coming out of college rather. So I stashed him in a couple of leagues. So he's worth a look. Matthew Stafford may be injured and out, so keep that in mind. You may see Brett Rippon as a quarterback. If that's the case, you could just downgrade the whole offense. Almost unplayable. So keep that in mind. All right, next game, Falcons and Titans. Whew. More quarterbacks in the limelight here. Will Levis makes his debut because Ryan Tannehill is injured. 19 for 29, 238 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the most production came from DeAndre Hopkins. Just 6 targets. Keep this in mind, 6 targets. He had 4 catches, 128 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's a nice spike week for DeAndre Hopkins. He still got it. If you look at charts, man versus zone coverage, that kind of stuff, he's up there, man. He gets volume on targets. So he's an interesting buy low candidate and worth your time. Derrick Henry, 101 yards on the ground. Tajay Spears didn't see as much volume, 3 touches, 27 yards. So little touches, high production. And then that was pretty much it for the pass catchers and running backs for the Titans. Atlanta, Desmond Ridder went out with a concussion. Taylor Heineke came in and was solid. I think he's a better player than Ridder. Will you see a better distribution to the pass catchers? Probably not. Drake London had 7 targets. That was tops. Not a lot to write home about there. Bijan Robinson had more of a bounce back week as a runner. Only 11 touches, but very productive, 62 yards and a touchdown. Saints Colts. I saw that game live. Thank you, Adam Gehrig, for that. That was fantastic. We had great seats. It was a good experience. I hadn't been to the Colts Stadium yet. Nice place. It's really, really good construction and easy to get in and out of in Indianapolis. Derek Carr had a solid game, 310 yards, 2 touchdowns. Taysom Hill is the guy that I've been pounding the table for. I picked him up in a couple leagues 2 weeks ago. He had 9 rushes, 63 yards, averaging 7 yards a carry, 2 touchdowns. And then Rashid Shaheed, 3 catches, 153 yards, 1 touchdown. Michael Thomas had 7 targets. Alvin Kamara had 4 catches for 51 yards on 5 targets. And then Chris Olave had 9 targets, but only had 5 catches. He wasn't as sharp this week, but he's still a good buy low candidate in Dynasty. Man, I'm loving what I'm seeing out of Josh Downs. 7 receptions, 72 yards, 9 targets. And then Michael Pittman, 13 targets, 8 catches, and a touchdown. That's where the heavy distribution is, those 2 guys. And then Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss both were productive on the ground. So I would still hold both of those guys in seasonal and definitely Dynasty. Jonathan Taylor, I would be trading for him. There's a little bit of a buy window there. All right. Next game, Dolphins-Patriots. Dolphins beat the Patriots 31-17. There's not a whole lot to talk about with the Patriots. The one guy that's interesting, Kendrick Bourne, tore his ACL. Look to pick up Demario Douglas to fill his role, but not count on him consistently. If he's your 5th or 6th receiver in seasonal. Miami, Tua's productive, 324 yards, 3 touchdowns. Mostert, not as productive, but still solid game. But Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, this is why we love the Dolphins if you're a fantasy football fan. Here are the distribution on targets, 12 and 13 to those guys. Next highest guy was 4 targets on the team. Waddle brought it this week. Tyreek Hill always brings it. Those guys are always owns in that league, or in that format. All right, Jets, Giants. Jets beat the Giants 13-10. This is the battle of who could care less, and that is definitely a Ben Folds 5 reference. Zach Wilson, not good. Rumor is Aaron Rodgers is way ahead of his rehab on his Achilles, and I saw him taking throws the other day and putting weight on his foot. If he's back, you're going to see a massive spike in offense for Breece Hall, for Garrett Wilson. I mean, those guys are going to go through the roof. Garrett Wilson had 13 targets, 100 yards. Breece Hall had 9 targets, 6 catches, 76 yards, and a touchdown. And then we talk about the Giants offense. You ready for this? 7 fucking yards. 7 yards is all they had in the air. 7 yards. 7, that's it. And then Darren Waller got hurt with a hamstring. I mean, there's nobody worth owning. They rode Saquon Barkley for 36 carries and 128 yards. That's all they've got. That's it. If Darren Waller's hurt, they will hyper-focus on Barkley in the box. None of these pass catchers are interesting to me. Sucks. All right, next game, Jaguars, Steelers. Jags, 6-2, beat the Steelers 20-10. Trevor Lawrence, almost 300 yards, 1 touchdown. ETN steals the bell cow there, 24 carries, 79 yards. And then ETN in the air, 70 yards, 3 catches, and a touchdown there. And as far as targets go, pretty good distribution for fantasy. Evan Ingram, 10. Calvin Ridley, 10. ETN, 6. Christian Kirk, 5. Pretty solid. Good ceilings, good floors for those players. Kenny Pickett got hurt for the Steelers. So you're going to see Mitch Trubisky this week, likely. Downgrade that offense for sure. But there's one other thing noting about the entire offense. Deontay Johnson, 14 targets. It's quite a bit. Next game, Eagles, Commanders. For fantasy, banger game. Eagles won 38-31. Jalen Hurts, 319 yards, although he did injure his knee. Should play this week. We'll see. DeAndre Swift got a touchdown on the ground. And then, as usual, A.J. Alpha Brown, 8 receptions, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, 8 targets. Devonta Smith, who's had a shit ton of air yards this year, 7 receptions, 99 yards, 1 touchdown on 7 targets. And then Dallas Goedert wasn't as productive, but he had 7 targets. So still believe in him. Sam Howell, man, he brought it. I've been pounding the table for him. I own him in seasonal. Almost 400 yards in the air, 400. 4 touchdowns, and then a pretty good distribution to the receivers. Jahan Dotson, finally a good game from him. 10 targets, 108 yards with a touchdown. Jamison Crowder, 7 targets. Terry McLaurin, 12 targets, but he only had 5 catches. And then Logan Thomas, 8 targets. So, if they're coming from behind, Sam Howell is capable of giving you those spike weeks. So I would continue to pound the table for Sam Howell on seasonal. Okay, next game, Carolina Panthers, Houston Texans. Interesting because is Bryce Young taking on C.J. Stroud. Neither of them were lights out, but Bryce Young had the better game for sure. Nobody on the Texans is worth talking about for a spike week in fantasy production. And then Adam Thielen is the star of the offense at the pass catcher position and even at running back for the Carolina Panthers. Chuba Hubbard wasn't that great, but that's a good buy low window for him. So next game, Seahawks and Browns. Seahawks beat the Browns 24-20. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet pretty comparable on the number of carries. So you see that split a little bit more. Pass catchers, targets, DK Metcalf, 14. Tyler Lockett, 9. Jackson Smith and Jigba only had 4, but they went to him late in the game for the winning touchdown. That's pretty much it for them. Amari Cooper, I cannot believe he had 11 targets, and David Njoku had 8 targets from PJ Walker. It's pretty incredible. So those guys are worth owning. It's important to note the split between Deshaun Watson and PJ Walker to David Njoku is vast. Watson doesn't target him as much. Keep that in mind. Pierre Strong continues to be a deeper stash. And then Jerome Ford worked back into the mix. All the running backs did pretty well this week. Not on volume, but just on efficiency. Next game of the week, Denver Broncos, Kansas City Chiefs. Broncos surprised the Chiefs and beat them 24-9. I got to tell you, I don't think their offense, the Chiefs, is that good. Other than Kelsey, Rashee Rice is the next guy up, but beyond that, it's a massive drop-off. Not a lot of production from the running back position, just an altogether gross fantasy week. Russell Wilson, 3 touchdowns, not a lot of yards in the air. Javonte Williams, though, 85 yards on 27 carries. And then he had 3 catches for 13 yards and a touchdown. He was interesting. Jerry Jeudy, 6 targets. Beyond that, it was a mess. Not good for fantasy. Next game, Baltimore Ravens beat the Cardinals 31-24. Gus Edwards, big spike week for him. 80 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. Mark Andrews is that consistent tight end producer, 4 receptions, 40 yards, touchdown. Zay Flowers led the pass catchers with 7 targets, but only had 5 receptions for 19 yards. Gus Edwards was the star of that game on offense for them. Arizona Cardinals, we can expect Kyler Murray to come back here very soon, so keep that in mind. But Amari Diamercado, 20 carries, 78 yards. He was productive. The star of that game, Trey McBride, 10 receptions, 95 yards, touchdown on 14 targets. So I've been pounding the table for him. He's in the pickups this week. He was in it last week because I thought he'd get a spike. All right, we've got 3 more games. Hang in there. Cincinnati Bengals, 31. They beat the San Francisco 49ers to 31-17. Okay, Joe Burrow is back to his old ways. 3 touchdowns. Jamar Chase, 12 targets, 10 receptions, 100 yards, 1 touchdown. And then Joe Mixon had a good game, 87 yards on the ground with a touchdown. Brock Purdy, fantasy, he was good, 365 yards. But in real life, you have questions about whether he's the dude or not. McCaffrey, super reliable. Was it 17th or 18th game in a row with a touchdown on the ground and in the air as well. And then targets, they were pretty damn good if you like fantasy. George Kittle, 11. Brandon Ayuk, 9. Christian McCaffrey, 7. It's good distribution. All right, next game. Chargers beat the Bears 30-13. Justin Herbert, almost 300 yards in the air, 3 touchdowns. He looked sharp. So did Austin Eckler in the air, not as much on the ground. That's what you expect. Eckler had 8 targets, 7 receptions, 94 yards, and a touchdown. Keenan Allen had 8 catches for 69 yards, 10 targets, and then potential breakout candidate here coming up, Quentin Johnston, 6 targets, 5 catches, 50 yards in the air. So that was pretty good. As far as the Bears go, I think we're going to see Justin Fields come back this week or the following week. So Tyson Bagent, he did pretty well considering he's a Division II rookie, but not great. So we'll see Justin Fields back. 10 targets for Cole Kmet, 6 targets for DJ Moore. And then Deontay Foreman led the running backs with 9 carries. It's kind of an even distribution, though. Roshan Johnson had 6, and then Darrington Evans, who looked pretty good, had 4. All right, last game of the week. I watched this one last night, 26-14. The Lions beat the Raiders. You want to see the Lions really put it on the Raiders here, and they didn't. They looked like the better team, but for whatever reason, they didn't score enough points in my mind, to be a dominant team. Jared Goff looked pretty good, but Jahmyr Gibbs killed it. 26 carries, 152 yards, and a touchdown. 5 receptions, 37 yards in the air. He looked fantastic last night. Sam Laporta, 10 targets. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 9 targets. So those are the stars of that offense. Vegas, Jimmy G ain't that dude. You just wonder if at some point they bring in Aiden O'Connell to see what they have. Josh Jacobs was solid on the ground. And then in the air, Devontae Adams, 7 targets, 1 reception, 11 yards. You just wonder if he's going to get traded today. Jaguars would be a good spot for him. So anyways, that's all I've got this week. 20-minute video. It's a lot. Hope you're doing well out there.